So here I am today, again for another Freedom to Feel conversation. And today with Shervon Laurice. She is a licensed clinical professional counselor and certified yoga therapist. I guess my first question for you, although we have been talking off record for a little bit, is I would love to hear in your own words, how do you see yourself? How, if I ask you the question, who are you in your own words? What would you say, Shervon?
Well, that's a very layered question.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean,
Right.
I could answer in all the ways that people do, as a woman, as, a therapist, as a sister, as a daughter. The term I would most use that resonates with me is that I'm a seeker. I have
Yeah.
been a seeker since I was a small child. And I've always asked the questions that are kind of out of the box. When I was a kid, asking the questions that should not be asked.
Yeah. I
um,
know. Uh,
you're just supposed to believe. That's
yeah.
it.
Right.
So
Right.
I would
Mm,
say I'm a seeker. I also, I'm a child of the Creator, whatever that means.
yes. Another question that comes to me with that answer is what do you feel you are seeking to find? What is there to be found ultimately?
Ultimately, who I am. Where
Hmm.
did we all come? Um,
Yeah.
based on creation, who sustains us,
Right.
truth, basically.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another
It's always
interesting.
been curious.
Yeah. You're saying I always been curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yes,
curiosity, that's do you do you believe or think or feel that curiosity can take us to truth?
I believe so. Yes. I think it has to start that people live by default. Most
Yeah.
people live based on their cultural norms, the way they were
Yeah.
raised, and many
Yeah.
don't ask the
Yeah. They don't ask the main questions, those hard questions, those deeper questions, right,
yeah.
Shervon? Another question. How did you what inspired you to become a therapist?
Uh, I've been doing this, I would say, since high school. My first experience was in my junior year in high school, and it was during the 80s. And then I took an actual paying job at my community center in my neighborhood near my school as a peer counselor. And, at that time, AIDS had just hit the scene. So we were trained
Yeah.
in that way, but we also were trained to work with people to prevent suicide, as teenagers and all the
Yeah.
stressors of being a teenager. So the bug for therapy hit early.
Yeah.
And I went up that much about it in college, but in my 20s, as a case manager working in social, I knew that therapy would be more fulfilling than the work that I was doing in my 20s. So I went back and got my graduate
Mm,
degree.
yeah. So it
Yeah.
feels or felt like a calling, doesn't it? A lot of we
Very
yeah,
much.
we right, like a purpose, something that's
Yes.
that comes from the heart, from the soul. It's deep.
Yes.
Uh
Absolutely.
I agree. And with that in mind, let me ask you an open question. What do you feel is the purpose of the human experience?
Ah, that's a nice.
Yeah.
um, to learn, It is, to me, the purpose of human experience. We choose to come here to learn,
Yeah.
to learn, basically to learn to love, to learn
Ah.
who we are
Mm.
based the coverings, the veil we agree to come in under. So when we're born and in the cultural references that we're raised in, we have no idea who we are. And our life is really about us exploring and understanding based on. And so it's, I've heard people say, this is Earth school. Earth is
Yeah.
school. And I agree with that. I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It really feels like that we are here to learn. And I love the way you said that, to learn how to love. Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is that a spiritual understanding, Shervon? Is that do you have a fixed, spiritual view or understanding of life?
It is not so anymore. It is interesting. I was raised as a preacher's kid in the Pentecostal tradition. I still have teachers in my family. And I came away from church as a youth thinking I understood.
Yeah.
But that seeker in me, as soon as I got off to college, there were these where I was presented different. I eventually changed my major from, I went in as a pre-med and eventually changed my major to religious studies because that seeker
Yeah. Yeah.
was called,
Yeah.
it was that really started to shift my perspective and helped me to see that thread, a line that runs through almost every religion points us back to who we are. And so over time, I decided not to hold any kind of particular view because it's as soon as we label something, then we leave so much more. We're no longer open to definition of what it could be. So I leave myself open. I would definitely say I lean more metaphysical in reference to spirituality, but that's as far as I want to label myself these days.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true, though. The other day, I was, I'm always reflecting, contemplating this moment, this life, what this is. And the other day I was here at the city here on my sofa, and then I looked outside the tree, and then I didn't know what it was anymore. For a second, I had no idea what this was. And it was magical. It's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. But then came back right away thinking, came back.
Yeah, that moment of discovery.
Yeah, right. So how do we kind of expand or extend those moments, those moments of clarity we have? Have you found a way of doing that?
It is really about present-centered focus. And that is a practice I think that we all could benefit from. Our brains are always in overdrive, especially in these modern hurried times. We do a lot more thinking rather than feeling, And when we can drop back into our bodies, get out of our heads, and allow ourselves to be present, whether that's noting the soles of your feet on the ground or on the floor, where your butt meets up with your seat, or the breath moving in and out of your nostrils, just for a couple of moments, that allows you to be so much more expansive. It's almost like we live like this all day when we're thinking, doing, and we're in our sympathetic nervous system. As
Yeah.
soon as we can drop into our bodies and connect to our breathing, we can open up that space of what we see, hear, feel, experience, and allow
Right.
that bit of expansion.
Ah.
You
It
know?
feels like it already feels like a meditation actually listening to you. Yeah, it feels great.
That's what it should be. It should be
Yeah,
a meditation.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, guided meditation. So it's a reminder,
Yeah.
right, Shervon? Like in this
Yeah.
moment, you being this remind the voice
Mhm.
of remembering who we are. Hmm.
Yes.
So, with this in mind, I guess I'll ask you the two main questions before we explore more of the topic of letting go, the art of stepping into now, which
Mhm.
you have already beautifully illustrated. So,
Mm.
the main questions for these video interviews are: what is freedom from the perspective of feelings and emotions? And how do
Mhm.
we learn to access that in the on a daily basis, access, integrate it, and maintain
Yeah.
this feeling of freedom?
Yeah. I love this question because it allowed me to really go with the idea that I've had percolating for some time. And it's that our emotions and our feelings are actually our first language. When you think
Mm-hmm.
about being a baby, being a toddler, when we're pre-verbal, really have is the emotional connection to the people in our environment.
Right,
And
right.
when we're that age, actually sense and feel what's going on in our environment because feelings are frequency. And
Yeah.
everything on the earth plane is frequency in
Mm,
our emotions and our. But then what happens
right.
is once we start talking, that intuitive feeling and emotion is trained. We are then taught to use our, which is to thinking mind, rather than
Mm,
that observational mind like you had the other day when you look at your window and
yeah,
moments,
yeah, yeah.
you forgot what it was.
Right, right.
Our mind allows us to drop into our bodies and feel and experience emotions, and then be able to feel and experience other people's emotions. That's really
Ah,
what it's about. And so, freedom in reference to emotions is really about allowing ourselves to drop back in to
right.
feeling and feeling that
Mm,
fully. Sometimes, and I remember a client of mine said, too emotional. And I
right.
looked at her quizzically and I said, how do you mean? Because
Huh,
I truly believe our
mm,
emotions are than what our thinking or words can ever. The
ah,
ability to drop in
ah,
and tap back into those emotions, feel them, don't judge them. We say, oh, that's a good emotion or that's a negative emotion or a bad emotion. No, just feel what comes up.
yeah.
Allow teach you or give you something. And then you
Mm,
allow it to move through you and release so that
ah,
you're not holding on to what it is. Allow it
right.
to and move through you so that it doesn't form blockages in your body. So that's the key,
Mm,
I think, to freedom is the allowing. Because when we can feel our emotions, it guides us back to who we really are. you know.
Yeah.
That is just that present centered focus. It's really taking a moment sometimes when something happens and we have this automatic feeling to stuff it down and ignore it. No, it's like
Yeah.
just take a second and allow it and inquire just within your mind, okay, where did that come from or what triggered that?
Mm.
And breathe into that space through you, you know? Sometimes we can't do
Right.
that in the immediate moment, but you can come back and really investigate it and allow yourself to let that go, you know, that present centered
Yeah.
focus. And sometimes it comes up in movement, all forms of yoga. But I
Right.
believe the slower forms of yoga really allow us to access that space. All forms of meditation, but I also believe mindfulness meditation, tantra meditations allow us
Yeah.
to better access that space. Being out in nature in
Yeah.
general, doing
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So true.
What else? There's so
Mm.
many things. Exercise in general allows us to drop back in and we can more easily access feelings and emotion because we're in the body in that moment.
Wow. Yeah, it very much resonates with me, makes a lot of sense. Of course, with me in this moment, and I have been doing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work that has to do exactly with that, just listening to
Yeah.
my emotions. The question that comes to mind is why do some of us, or why did I, because in the past that's exactly what I did, uh, why do we tend to block and we tend to push away and try to escape those let's say harsh or heavier. I don't want to label
Mm-hmm.
those emotions, but we have to in a way. So that feels
Mm-hmm.
negative. Is that something that has to do with being open to life, doing some of the healing work? What is it about pushing away emotions that feel so attractive to us?
Mm. I think it's likely twofold. Some of it is our training and upbringing. Most of
Yeah,
us are taught to tamp down those emotions. When a toddler is crying, oh, don't
right.
cry.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
starts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
And if
true.
it's the kind of emotion that our caregivers or did not have the capacity moment, then
Yeah,
we were that it was not important. Boys get it,
right.
I think, more than girls, because
Yeah,
boys are supposed to be strong and not have emotions, or at
yeah,
least those kinds of strong emotions.
yeah.
And so we're taught by our
Mm,
people in our environment to tamp those things down. The other
right.
side of that, too, is
Yeah.
we learn to tamp because we don't want to seem like we're too much
Yeah,
for other people to deal with. We
right.
don't want to feel like
Mm,
those emotions
mm,
are going to overwhelm us or take us over and we lose control.
right.
Those are
Uh,
the reasons I believe that it happens the most.
so losing control, right? That's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, with this in mind, especially when it comes to controlling emotions, you mentioned in one of the emails that we exchanged about
Mm-hmm.
fear versus love. So this is a good time to
Yes.
talk about fear because control seems to me very
Yes.
much to be connected to fear. So talk to me about the
Absolutely.
difference between love and fear coming from these two places.
Yeah. So I'd always grown up with the notion that the opposite of love is hate. And many
Yeah,
people will give you that definition in that comparison in their mind's eye. Even
yeah,
ways.
yeah.
Self is not the opposite of love. Hate is
Mm,
rooted in something,
right.
and it is rooted in fear. When
Mm,
we are in the space of our open, we are present.
yeah,
We feel connection. We're in a space of expansion. We're in a
yeah.
space of allowing.
Mm.
We can take a bigger breath when we're standing in that space. We're
Yeah.
moving from this space. There is anxiety, there is doubt, oftentimes depression or depressed mood. There is contraction. Every conflict, I believe, on the planet stems from fear of something. There's this fear of loss, a sense of lack and fear. It just, when we're in that fear, we cannot receive. We only constrict, and we're not giving, and we're also not receiving. You know, that's the difference for me. And so oftentimes I can talk with someone, and if they're talking about a feeling they have, I'm like, well, are you standing in fear, or you feel like you're standing in love? Everything we do comes from one of the spaces.
Yeah, it very much, and that's another truth. It really sounds true to me. I mean, we talked earlier about finding truth. You mentioned as a seeker, it seems like that's what we are trying to find here. But it's so obvious, isn't it? In a way, Shervon, it's love. So it's very so obvious that we miss it.
Yes.
Right?
Because our society, we think of love, we think of all the mushiness and the romantic love and Disney and the movies and all of that. But love is so much bigger than those things.
And it also sounds much easier to navigate this reality driven by love. It really keeps coming back to me. Like in the face of challenges, there's a voice in me that says it's easy. You can love. You can be kind. Just let kindness and love be your guides, and it's much easier that way.
Yes.
It's a very strong voice that says that, and that's my lately from the I would say the last 2 months. It has been a very strong guidance voice, almost like this very powerful voice that says, no matter what, you can always rely on kindness and love. Always return to it when you decide. It has been very interesting how it's speaking louder now for some reason. Well, I'm going through some change, in life, and a lot that happened. So I guess, I needed to hear that. So I have another question for you. One of your blog posts, Here and Now, tips for staying present. You already actually talked about some of them, outlined some of them: breathing work, mindfulness, meditation. So there are other components in nature, of course. But talk to me for a moment about gratitude and self-love. Yeah, those two. I mean, I love gratitude, of course, is a big one, but self-love has been almost my foundation for inner peace. It has been for me. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Self-love, it's interesting in our modern society. People can love else. People will say to me, it's easier to love is for them to really love themselves. And I get that on the one hand, but on the other, if you don't love yourself, how can you offer love? True, expansive love, right? Is the love when you don't love yourself, is the love that you feel for someone else contractual? Is it more about trying to get something from someone else? Is it real expansive love? And so self-love is about starting with checking what your messages are moving around in your head. Most people don't realize that of the comments and statements and messages that we have bouncing around in our head all day are negative self-talk.
Yeah.
But we don't even realize we're doing it. You know, but when I give that to really check in with what they're thinking about, they're so surprised.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah. Yeah.
was surprised when I learned
Yeah.
this for myself.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say these things to a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah,
You know,
true.
so it's what messages we're giving to ourselves,
Yeah.
and then how we take care of ourselves. If we say we love ourselves, then are we doing the best we can? And that is a healthful diet for yourself, so that you're feeding yourself the nutrition that you need to do all the things that you do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. Getting enough sleep. Side, are you naughty? What are the things that you're doing to take care of yourself? Right?
Yeah.
And then to loving other, like the basics. One of my favorite scriptures is in the New Testament, attributed to Jesus, when the disciple asks him, what is the greatest commandment? And he says, first, to love God with all your heart and soul, but two, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Everybody forgets the as you love yourself part.
Yeah. Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is it. That's what I think about when where I'm talking to someone about loving themselves, or me loving myself. How am I taking care of myself? You know, so key.
Yeah.
So key.
It is. A question for you is, since you mentioned God, where is God? When you think of God, how would you define what God is? And where is he, her, or it?
God is everywhere in everything, because God is energy. God is the energy that created our universe, all the universes, and us. So we talk about God being this, you know, in humanized God to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Gender, certain kinds of behavior, all of but God, that again, therefore, of God, and you don't so much bigger, much more expansive than that, you know. And for me, God is love. To me, the word love and God are synonymous. That's why I believe when we're in love, then we're living in fear.
Right.
What my pastor of the I am a member of says, and I want to make sure I get this exact, that every bit of sea in our world, that person who's committing the violence at that moment was not aware. So that he says it that way because love is always. It is not subject to time.
Right.
Love is always, but sometimes our ego minds can block our perception of what God or what love is. Violent act, and it can be a violent act of words or physical violence.
Right.
It is the experiencing God's love in that moment.
Yeah, that's another beautiful insight that resonates. True. What you said earlier about in the it's Old Testament that says love God,
Oh,
and then when I
New
asked you about
Testament.
New Testament,
Mm-hmm.
love God, and then I asked you who is God and where is God, and you said God is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, that already answers. I mean, says it all, right? Love God because God's everywhere. Love everyone,
Yes.
everything. So it's wow, that's a powerful message, right? Because
Yes.
God is everywhere.
Biblical.
Hmm.
That's right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that Jesus's
How
message
amazing.
was powerful, but we've narrowed it away that we've missed the fullness of his message.
Yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
it's also very simple, and it seems like we are trying to find something that's a lot more complex, grandiose, but it's so simple and it's so basic,
Yes.
right, Shervon? So
Indeed.
basic.
Indeed. It really
Um,
is.
uh, so it is when you mention the ego, is that so what does it take for us to move? Is that only fear moving from the constructed ideas of who we are to this more expansive truth of who we are? This shift, how does when does I mean, because we can intellectually understand these things and then we can
Mm-hmm.
practice, to put them into action and really
Mm-hmm.
kind of express these things. But I'm wondering if we can realize this truth of love, of the message of Jesus, and become more, let's say, without the mind, without thinking, just being so natural
Yes.
and so, yeah, is that possible? I wonder.
It is.
Yeah.
So, in these spaces that we create for ourselves, there are these moments or a glimpse that we have, right?
Yeah.
There are consistent, regular meditator. You'll get a meditation practice,
Right.
a hike out in nature,
Yeah.
and the rustling of the trees and feeling the wind on the sun on your
Yeah.
skin. You have connection. When
Yeah.
hanging out with family members, loved ones, and you are in this space of fully present, you get the glimpse. So we can take these throughout day to day and get these glimpses, expand on them. There's another way. I'm also a certified cannabis assisted psychedelic therapist,
Mm,
and there's this
yeah.
rise in curiosity around
Right.
and psychedelic journey, especially with a trained therapist, is
Right.
getting into that space. One of the most
Mm,
consistent things, I was talking to someone this morning about this, that the consistent thing that I hear from people coming out of a psychedelic space is that everything is love. It's like in that
yeah.
space, you suddenly realize, oh, everything really is love.
Yeah.
And you're not
Yeah.
thinking it, you suddenly
Mm.
know it,
Ah,
And so
yeah.
it's these
Yeah.
moments that we can grab and grasp,
Mm,
consciously in our
mm.
day to day, try to hold on to that and see that and slip back into it.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
bringing that knowledge into our day-to-day lives and expanding
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more each time. That
Yeah.
also resonates. Another question I have for you when it comes to that is
Yeah.
that this we have a very strong grasp, the mind does, in this in ideas, concepts, like we talked before
Yeah.
about emotions. We tend to push away anything that feels negative or it sounds negative.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we learn to expand that love that we're speaking of here, when it comes to violence and a reality, when we are exposed to a reality that really feels violent, aggressive. How do we
Mm.
learn to do that?
I think there's a couple of ways. If the violence is more personal and direct, um, is finding a way, hopefully, out of that situation is one. Like
Mm,
being able to get distance, or mentally, emotionally, or physically from it. But the other piece is knowing that if a person knew better, they would do better. So this goes into
yeah.
forgiveness.
Mm, yeah.
Forgiveness is not saying to
Mm,
someone, I forgive you, and, you know, forgetting what it is they did or absolving them of whatever it is that they did. Forgiveness in its truest sense is knowing that everything in our environment is love. Everything in our environment is created by God. That if something violent has happened, in that moment was aware of God's love.
yeah.
Ways and understand that that's where that person is. It takes the personal out of it for you to some extent, right?
Yeah.
You can step back and say, okay, that was really crappy what they did. You can still name it, right? And acknowledge that you do not have to subject yourself to that. At the same time, realize that person in their state of being, knowing what you know about that person, that's as good as they could have done in that moment. And that is where forgiveness comes in. That's the level of forgiveness. That it's the letting go for you, right? So that you're not holding on to these old traumas, these old hurts, this violence. It's the letting go. Because the other person goes off and they're doing their thing.
Yeah.
And
True.
if we're holding on to that, we're holding grudges or anger, those are emotions that we're not fully allowing to move through us. And what happens residents in our body, and they get stuck. That stuckness can affect us mentally, emotionally, and or physically. So forgiveness is all of our jobs. We cannot hold on to traumas, hurts, feelings of pain, violence, because it affects us more than the person.
Right. That's a beautiful suggestion. So what comes to me is that, so it is the taking it, the perspective of a person. So by taking it personally, whatever it is that's happening, by viewing from that perspective, it's easier to get stuck and to get caught up in that. But then if we come from the impersonal, more expansive, God-like mind, then it's forgiveness is it's natural. It's as natural as breathing, right, Shervon? It makes sense. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yuppie.
Exactly. When we hold on to hurts, it's almost like we're saying we are not the powerful beings that God created us to be.
Right.
That we allow someone else's behavior or words to take us down to a point where we feel overwhelmed.
Right.
But we that God created us to be.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's key to me. That's key. So it is the identification, with the body, with the human mind, and all the associations we make, and all these concepts that we have, constructed concepts. But then, because then it takes us away, as you said, from the God-like self, actually authentic self, who we really are. How amazing that we forget that. It really surprises me that we
Yes.
have forgotten, right, who we are. But
Yes.
well, not entirely. Not entirely.
Hopefully
We're almost
not.
at the
Hopefully
end.
not.
Right, right. We are almost at the end, and I do want to hear from you still about just one more topic, gratitude. We didn't discuss that topic. Two quotes that I found on your website that caught my attention in one of your blog posts. One says, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. That was Freud. And then there's another one that reads, the real gift of gratitude is that the more grateful we are, the more present you become. That was Robert
Yes.
Holden. Yeah. So
Yes.
gratitude and presence, they are connected.
They are very connected. And the first quote from unexpressed emotions, so that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, allowing yourself to feel fully your emotions, right? To step into what's coming up for you at any given moment. Because one express them, and it's not that you have to say them out loud to another human being. It might be that you need to do that, but sometimes it's just simply acknowledging that you're having that emotion.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's simply being aware and saying, "Ooh, I feel this way or that way about what happened right then." Or
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even anything that happened. Our brains are so fine tuned to our environment cycle that we mention that in our brains that comes up. Smell is our sense that develops in our central nervous system. And when we have had either very positive or very traumatic experiences, especially in our youth, it's stored not only saw, felt, or heard, but also the smell.
Yeah.
Many people have talked about, oh, they smell this thing and it flashed
Yeah.
7 years old, or when they were 13 years old, or when they were just from smell alone, right? Sometimes you can smell something and it triggers an emotion, but if you're not aware or in tune with your emotions, you don't even understand why suddenly you're agitated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you can
Yeah.
pause,
Yeah.
tune into the agitation, and then trace the agitation to the emotion, and then realize you smelled something that reminded you of some negative experience in the past.
Right.
And then you can let it go, right? Because it's in the past is no
Yeah.
longer here, and we're not
Right.
in the future because it is not here. We only have now. And we
Yeah.
have to get to the place where we can let go of those past, what we call experiences, fully in the present, and hopefully move in really profound and enlightened future. You know, so that's about expressing. It have to, otherwise you're living again in fear and you're living constricted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Gratitude,
yeah.
it's everything.
Yeah.
gratitude
I agree. Yeah.
gratitude
Yeah.
is an expression of love. It's
Yeah.
when you can be fully and know that everything you are and everything you have and all of that are in your life are for a purpose, and it's all
Right.
good. And the more
Yeah.
grateful you can be, the more you can attract more of that love, more of the things that you want that reciprocate some more of that gratitude.
Right.
It's so interesting that people are talking a lot about manifestation these days.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
everywhere. And gratitude, I think, is the key to manifestation. Trying to consciously manifest something casually in your life,
Yeah.
that loveliness in your life, grateful for the little big things, brings more of that to your.
Wow. That what comes to me is forgiveness when you mentioned that earlier. So by carrying this perfume of forgiveness, it's automatically makes gratitude like arise. It's, I mean,
Yes,
forgiveness and gratitude, they go hand in hand. That's for sure. They then
they really do. I'd like to share with you, Val. Um,
yeah.
I think it was November of 2019. I was doing meditation, and I'm a student of Tantra, and I had gone through, by that point, about 4 years of Tantra stuff. I was doing my normal morning meditation. This experience like none other that I will never. I had this overwhelming of forgiveness rise in me. And forgiveness was never something easy for me.
Right.
But I had been stuck on it by that point and being.
Yeah.
And I was in this meditation, and my heart became overwhelmed with this sense of forgiveness and letting go, particularly of two people in my past that I felt like had hurt, one in my childhood and one in my adulthood, and very recent to that. And then after that wave of forgiveness, it just allowed love and gratitude to rise in such a way I had never experienced. Continues to follow me ever.
Wow.
So yes, forgiveness is that, called it the perfume of forgiveness. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I mean,
Beautiful.
really, it feels true to me. Another thing you said just now that caught my attention was when you said about everything that's happening to us, everything, everyone around us, there's a purpose for that to be. So, and that kind of reminded me of somebody from Brazil said something interesting. He used to say all the time, he said, all paths are trying or are taking us to Jesus. Everything, it's actually working its way to bring us to Jesus. He used to say that so often that I never forgot that. And now you reminded me of that phrase.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. All paths lead back to God. All paths lead.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what Jesus represents to all of us.
To
We
all of
call
us.
Christ consciousness. Thank you so much, Shervon, for
Yes.
your beautiful presence here today with me, sharing this moment in life. It feels very, I feel very grateful to have people like yourself around me, around us, people who watch these videos. So thank you so much for everything that you do,
You are
this beautiful
so
intention from the heart.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
are so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have one more question, two questions. One's technical. If there's one message you wish everyone to take with them from this conversation today, what would that be?
To begin a practice of present-centered focus. That would be the thing I would want. And you have to figure out or find out what your practice will be. Like, some people can't sit for meditation, or find something else. It could be gardening. It could be walks in nature, hikes in nature. It could be spending time at the beach. It could be anything else. It could be cooking, the activity is that allows you to be fully present for and in your body for, that's the start of present-centered focus.
I love that. I have a technical question, but before that, I want to thank you again for your presence, for what you do. It's really, really needed in our reality. I mean, our shared reality coming from that place of duality. So I really, really appreciate again
Mhm.
your presence in our reality, Shervon. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
before we say goodbye for today, where can we find more information about you, your work, and your services and future projects?
Okay. Well, my website is restoretranquility.com. And there you can tap into one of the contact pages, either for psychotherapy, yoga therapy, or cannabis, and send it off to me, and I will reach back out to you within usually 24 hours. I am actually looking right now for a new spot to teach yoga. Studios closed during the pandemic. I will also be posting there when I find a location to teach workshops and to do cannabis assisted circles. And any of those things, they can check me out on the website. I'm also on Instagram, Restore Tranquility, and on Facebook.
Ah, wonderful. And I'll have those links on your interview video profile. Thank you so much again, Shervon, for your presence, and we'll talk soon. Bye
You're
for now, my dear.
welcome. All right. Take care.
You too. Thank you.